Hello, this is Roger Capello, bringing you my week at the club, my further exploits at the Wachusett Chess Club in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. And this week was the second round of the Ernest E. Fangrayer Memorial, and I was paired with Alexander Venezia, who's an up-and-coming young player in his middle teens, and as Alexander has gained something like 300 or 400 points in the last 6 months or so, rating points. And so he's a force to be reckoned with. I beat him last month, actually in the picture on the lower right there, that was the game we were playing. But I was lucky I came back from basically a losing position and sort of swindled him with a kingside attack. So I took this game very seriously, and I had black this time. And he opened with pawn to king 4, e4, and the play proceeded along the lines of a Roy Lopez. I did the Morphy move, he retreated, and then I played d6, which characterizes the Neo-Steinus defense, which is a little stodgy, but one of its chief benefits, I guess, is that it isn't very often played. So it's not being popular, it comes as somewhat more of a surprise to my opponents than if I played along more standard lines. And he castled. That's one of the main moves at this point. c3 is also a main move. But after castling, I like to play bishop g4 and kind of establish this awkward pin on the knight. It's not easy to undo. Now he played c3 right away. Alternatively, sort of one of the principled lines that can happen at this point is that white could try to kick away the bishop immediately with h3, and then black has this fishing pole resource of h5, because the bishop is basically off limits. It really can't be taken, because if white should take the bishop, then the knight is reattacked, and either I regain my material with a destroyed kingside of whites, or he tries to save the material, and if he does that, then he's doomed. So, for example, if he comes back to h2, my queen comes out to h4, and it's very difficult to escape a mating attack here. Similarly, if let me go back a few moves here. If he instead goes to, where else can he can't really go anywhere else in this particular case that makes sense. Any other move, like knight to e1, for example, would allow the same queen move, and with mate threat on h1. So that pawn really can't be, the bishop can't be taken right away, and it can be attacked, that's fine, and this is a playable position, but usually play goes along the lines of white doing something like d6 and eventually moving his knight out to d2 here to defend the other knight, and the rook comes over, and then the knight comes into e1, where it helps to defend this h2 square so that the bishop can be taken. Anyhow, that's sort of a long, involved explanation of what's going on. After c3, the main move is for black to go ahead and play queen to f6, and the reason behind that is basically I want to develop this knight, but keep open this threat of the fishing pole attack and moving my queen over to the h-file, and so I need to get my queen on the other side of the knight. I didn't do that. Instead, I played the knight to e7 immediately, and this gives black a bit more of a congested game. It has the benefit, obviously, of allowing the recapture of the knight on c6 with the knight instead of with the pawn, and helps me to maintain my center. It does mean that I'm pretty well committed to fianchettoing my bishop, though. You played d3. I went ahead with the preparing to fianchetto. He developed his knight to d2. I fianchettoed. He attacked my bishop, And now I can't do the fishing pole attack because my queen is blocked out from the king side, and basically I would lose a piece if I let him take my bishop. So instead I retreat back to d7, which has the virtue now of it's breaking the pin and allows my knight to put some more influence over the d4 square where white is threatening to expand. He played rook e1 to defend his e-pawn, although I don't actually have it attacked in this variation. It's one disadvantage of having my knight on e7 instead of on f6, is that I'm not putting pressure on e4. I castled. He went ahead and continued the typical Ray Lopez plan of transferring the knight over to the king side, and usually comes then to either g3 or e6 to help out with a kingside, not defense so much as actually usually it helps out with a kingside attack, although it'd be a little hard to do in this particular formation. I drove away the bishop at this point, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to play d5. So forced the bishop to retreat. If it had just gone to back here, if it had gone to b3 instead, I would have just attacked it again, then forced it to go to c2, which would have given me time to expand on the queen side, and then be able to get my knight, even if he drives it away, it would allow my knight to then come in back behind my pawns. Something like that. So that was one possible line I thought would happen. Instead, he went all the way back to c2. And that allowed me to go ahead and play my d5 move, which may or may not be good in this position. If I take a quick peek here at what Stockfish says, he likes white by almost half a pawn. So it's probably a little overextended there in the center, trying to support both of my central pawns. But as it turned out, it worked okay in the game. He exchanged on d5. I took back. And let's move this up a little. And then he played knight to e3. So that was unexpected by me. In this position, what I was really worried about was sort of my weakness along this diagonal here from e4 to a8, because the knight on d5 right now is undefended, and if I move my bishop, the knight on c6 could be undefended. It's going to be pinned to the rook, and so I was worried about sequences such as d4, e takes, the bishop coming and attacking that undefended knight. But it turns out that after bishop e6, that black is nice and solid, so I didn't really have anything to worry about. And at this point, white can just go ahead and regain his pawn, but he's got an isolated pawn, and it turns out that position is a little bit in black's favor. So instead of that, though, he played knight e3. And this brings up sort of an interesting point, which is exchanging pieces. It's often the case that it's better to exchange pieces on your own terms than on your opponent's terms. And if I played knight takes knight right immediately, this would develop his bishop for him. Instead, back in this position, I just defend my knight, inviting him to go ahead and take my knight. Oops, wrong move there, sorry. Come back here. So I defend the knight, and now if he takes it and I take back, and then he plays bishop to e6, or bishop to e3 rather. Now it's my move in this position. In that other variation where I initiated the trade, it ended up with the exact same position, but it being his move. So I've actually gained a tempo by this little trick of letting him do the exchanging. I played queen to d7 to connect my rooks and get my queen off this dark square where it could be attacked by bishop to g5 at some point. I think that's a reasonable move. I was a little worried about putting my queen onto a square where it's undefended. And it could become the object of attack also, that this knight here on f3 could go to e5, where it could attack the queen on d7. So that was something else I had to keep an eye on. But it seemed like the best square. I didn't really want to go to one of the dark squares. And I did want to come up and give support to this knight and also get my rooks more mobile. He dropped his knight back to d2, and the idea here is sort of interesting and caused me to think for quite a while, and that's that he could be, well, he can do one of two things. He can either use the knight to support the bishop here on b3, or more to the point, he's thinking about moving the knight to b3 and into c5, where it would attack my queen. And so that caused me not to do what I would have liked to have done at this point. After knight to d2, it seemed like it would be nice to play my a rook over to d8 in order to put pressure along this file and start to pressurize this somewhat weak, this sensitive point on d3. But if I do that, when the knight comes along that path I just talked about, which is a little hard to prevent, then not only is it attacking my queen, it's also attacking the pawn over here on a6. So it's really giving him too much play. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to trade my bishop for his knight after it went to b3 or something of that sort. So instead, back in this position, I just played rook f to e8, kind of a useful, flexible, developing move. And keeping my options open with my other rook. Instead, he played bishop to b3 and forces the trade of bishops at this point. At least if he wants to initiate it, there's no way I can avoid it. I don't have to initiate it myself, and I didn't. So instead, I expanded on the queen side to gain a little more space over there and to start to exert some influence with this bishop on the long diagonal. Right coming into his queen side, it's kind of clear to me at this point that I should really be thinking about playing on the queen side. And his king side attack is not doing much at this point, and so it seemed like it was kind of a no-brainer to go ahead and expand on the queen side into attack, and also to threaten to push the pawn further and not let this bishop stay on b3, at least make him make a move with it. So he played, at that point then, knight to e4, which is interesting because he's threatening to come in now to this square we were just talking about. And that can cause problems for me. I took his bishop right away and kind of hoped that he might go in for into a little trap that I had prepared of what if he plays knight to c5, attacking my queen and the bishop both. And the problem with this is that I can just go ahead and take the queen, white takes my queen, but then my bishop can get out. So, I mean, there are actually a variety of ways this can happen. At the time, I was thinking I could play bishop to c2 and, threaten to come out by way of taking the d3 pawn. And it's hard for him to defend it if he brings the, well, let me just show you that. If I attack the pawn and then he defends that brings his knight out of harm's way here and also attacks the pawn at the same time, or defends the pawn rather, I could then play this rook over to d8 and I'd be able to get my bishop out that way. Let me make sure Stockfish agrees. Yes, -4. That's very, very good for black at that point. It's more than a whole piece. So that's not the way that Stockfish considered totally optimal, but it's good enough. So instead, after bishop takes b3, he took back with the a pawn. This gives him an open a file, which is good for him. But it does allow me to go ahead with continue with my plans of driving his knight out of the center. And now I'm actually nearly threatening to win a piece here after knight c5. Now, unfortunately, I can't. But it worried him enough that it caused him not to go into c5, and then that was actually a mistake that turned the tide in the game. But if he had gone, what I was looking at, if he'd gone into c5, was that my queen would go up, threatening the knight, because the idea now is to be threatening on my next move to play f5, f4, and causing this bishop to retreat, and then the knight is on prise. It turns out he has enough counter resources that doesn't actually work out. For example, even if he plays a knight into b5, which I thought, or b7, which I thought would be a lost piece, because I can come over and attack it with the rook. He can basically make a way out by attacking my queen and forcing my queen to retreat. And after my queen retreats, now he could use the c5 square, and that's not, the principal variation that Stockfish gives, but it's, the idea variation basically is that he could get back out of trouble by going there. So instead, what happened after I attacked his knight was that he had an oversight, and he retreated it back to d2. And the problem there is that there's just an undefended pawn, a loose pawn. So I went ahead and took it. And not only is it a loose pawn, but it allows my queen to come right into the heart of his position. And with that queen dominating the position, it's very hard for him to develop over the next few moves. He struck out with f5. That doesn't work out too well because I can just answer with e4. Now I have a protected passed pawn here on e4. And also that pawn is controlling the f3 square, so his knight can't come out easily. And it makes it very awkward for him to develop his pieces. He played queen to c1. It's maybe not the absolute strongest way to do it, but it's not real bad either. I went ahead and doubled on the d file so that restricts his bishop now from moving away, because then I have the knight attack twice and it's only defended once. So that's not going to work. You can't really, if he puts the rook on d1, that doesn't really work, because if he ever moves a knight, I just go ahead and trade a couple times on d1. I'm happy to trade. I have a protected passed pawn. So instead, he figured out a clever little maneuver. So he went to f1 with his knight. And here I played a weak move, which the reason I did that was, well, because I didn't see the virtues of another move, and I sort of mistook the virtues of the king f7 move. So what I overlooked was what I was thinking about playing was b4, and what I was looking at actually was him pushing the pawn and me taking the pawn. But then I was afraid his rook would come up and attack me. But of course this is no good because it's on prise to my pawn that's on b4. It would just take his rook. But back in this position, I didn't see that would be the case. Didn't visualize it correctly. So that's why I didn't play b4. Now the reason I played king f7 was that I wanted to get this knight free to move. But right now, the knight is necessary in case he plays rook to d1. So for example, if I had played knight to e7 and he plays rook to d1, then something of the following could happen. I trade off two major pieces, and now he's got control of the d file, which I didn't like. But my thinking was that if I were in a similar position with my king on f7, then I could move it over to e8 and immediately reestablish myself with the rook on the d file and keep him from invading on d7. So that's why I put my king on f7. But the problem is that my king is really exposed on f7. And I think if the game had gone a little differently, I might have might have run into difficulty with that king exposed. As it is, it's a little hard for him to attack it. And then he played king to f2, which at first I thought, oh, well, he mistook me for bringing my king to the center because I thought we were already in the endgame and that he was doing the same. But of course, as I looked at it a little more, I realized it was a cleverer idea than that. Because what he really had in mind was to play the rook up and then over, and by that reestablish control of d-file and get his pieces out of their cramped position. So I went ahead and played knight to e7. Again, there are better moves here. In the interest of time, I'll keep going along. He played rook e2. And now I have to be concerned because if I gave him one more move, my queen would get trapped. If he played rook to d2, my queen would have nowhere to go. So I retreated my queen. Went ahead and played rook to d2. And now I move my queen over to f6, which is threatening to come into h4 check and invade his king position. He didn't fully appreciate that and played bishop to e4, attacking my queen and the bishop behind it, thinking that his pawn on h3 was defended. But of course the problem is that after I come over and check and he interposes with the pawn, now the h pawn is not defended, and that's what happened. At this point I think he was a little rattled. He walked his king out into the center, hoping to, in the postmortem afterward, he said that the main idea was to try to play his rook over and either trap my queen with those sorts of maneuvers, or to win the pawn on h7. So he was hoping that it would be an aggressive move. But the problem is on e3 here, it's easy. Invites my knight to come in and add more fuel to the fire. So add another piece to the attack, which all of a sudden his position is looking very shaky. He should just go ahead and admit, that wasn't right and go back to f2 at this point. Instead, he went to e2, which allowed me to check with my queen. He went to e1, and then I pushed my e pawn, attacking his rook. The rook has to do something, so he went ahead and came over with threatening that maneuver I talked about a little while ago. But I went ahead and proceeded to push my e pawn because I saw a sequence of moves here that I liked. He doesn't want to move. He kind of has to take the pawn, because if he moves his knight, then this g pawn will fall a check, and that will be very bad. So he takes the pawn, but that allows me then to play my rook to e8 and threaten to win that rook. If he doesn't want to take it, oops, come back. Doesn't want to take it and have me take back with my rook check. That's just causing a world of hurt for him. So instead what he did was to defend with the queen, but that then allows me to trade the rooks off and now play my other rook to the e file, which pins the queen, keeps him from trading queens off, and forces him to make some sort of sheltering maneuver for his queen. Now the strongest one he could do here is just to play the bishop to e5. And although that's still bad, so for example, if we look at Stockfish, it's what, minus 1.7 so pawns. So it's jumped up. Now that's looked a little deeper. It sees it's about 2.5 pawn advantage to black. That's bad, but if you look at the actual move as played, it's actually more than a 5 pawn disadvantage. And the reason is I can simply take it, and as he takes back, then I can play queen takes pawn check. The king has to move. Now I can clean up another pawn, and the knight is pinned, attacked twice. It's defended twice, so it's not like I'm going to win it instantaneously, although I am threatening to play the bishop here to h6, which will then add yet another attack to the knight. So at this point he resigned. He could have played rook to f1 at this point, attacking my queen. And I think Stockfish says I should just play queen to e5 and continue along with a strong pin along the e file. I have two pins going right now. There's actually the absolute pin of the queen to the knight to the king, but there's also it's not an absolute pin, but it's a very strong pin of the knight to the queen. So it's caught in sort of the crossfire. And so I could either continue the pin to the queen, or the other possibility is to back off with my queen And now pretty much no matter what he does on this next move, I'm going to be able to put a third attack on the knight and cause problems. So let's see what Stockfish says. Queen f3, for example, and then if I play bishop to h6, now there are 3 attacks here. He can defend it a third time, but as you can see from the score, it's getting to be very bad. It's around 7-pawn advantage, something like that. And black, I'll just play a couple moves here, can maneuver around, and eventually we'll win material. But it's going to take a little while. So I don't know. Actually, this is one of those cases where maybe he should have continued on playing for a little while, because I had 5 minutes left in the game, and he had 20-some, 21, 22, 20, 23 minutes, something like that. So he could have continued for a bit more. There's a big advantage to black, and I think he was probably tired of defending at that point. So it's another week, another game, and I'll continue to bring you the action. I didn't mention it, but the middle panel on the right there is actually the game from this week. The lower panel was the game from the last time we played. But yeah, that's a game that was captured this week, and you can see Ray Paulson and Seth Ganeson and a few other people back there. It looks like Brett Kildall and somebody playing him. I can't quite make it out. So anyhow, this is Roger Capello. Glad to bring you this week's action, and I'll do the same again for you next week. So long for now.